Welcome to the Transformative Pathways Podcast with your host, Jason Doby. Join Jason as he explores the many ways to unlock personal growth, mindfulness, and spiritual transformation. So now, please welcome the host of Transformative Pathways, Jason Doby.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jason Doby, founder of Transformative Pathways Life Coaching. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we'll be discussing limiting beliefs and how they define your relationships with our guest, Mr. Andrew Rowe, who is joining us today from the UK. Andrew is an intuitive healer who has the ability to read your frequency and know exactly what's blocking you from manifesting love and your highest timeline. Andrew has had the pleasure to work with over 100 clients worldwide. Through his own rapid belief shifting method, he is able to guide clients through their blocks and help them heal their inner child and ultimately reconnect with their authentic self. Andrew, welcome to the show, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Nice to be here.
Awesome, man. All right, to start things off, Andrew, do you want to tell us a little bit about your personal journey and how you discovered your intuitive gifts? I'd love to hear about that.
So it is kind of a bit of a weird one. When I was at university, I got really into drugs. I got into like ketamine, which is a horse tranquilizer,
Okay.
and I started doing it like religiously, and it's it's very hallucinogenic, especially if you go into what is known as a K-hole. And yeah, it just became like really intense, and then I started to like kind of lose touch with reality a bit. And then I started to like hear voices and start to see energy, and started to become really acutely paranoid, and started to like believe that there were like just crazy stuff, like really paranoia. But like what was really weird was my reality kept on mirroring it back to me. So like I would like worry that the ducks, because I lived near a river, the ducks were laughing at me, and as the moment I just felt like that, the ducks started to like quack, and it was just this weirdest thing of like constant like reactions of like what was going on. And so I was like, okay, cool, I'm like, I've lost my mind, or I'm evil, or and I started to believe that I was evil. And then that started to be reflected back to me in like my dreamscape, and I just completely lost myself completely. And I got to the place where I really couldn't deal with life anymore, even though I was at university, and I was completely, you would never have guessed. If you looked at me, you would have never had an inkling of what was going on. It was all happening in here. And yeah, I decided to not take my life and decided to go on this journey of healing. And it was a long old journey, and I suffered from PTSD because of the drugs for a good 5-6 years after it all. And it just kind of was a domino effect. That was the catalyst. And then, I got into yoga, I got into meditation, I got into Reiki, I got into all these different things that they were all little like doorways towards where I was getting to. And I used to be a professional actor, and I always thought that I was just going to be an actor for the rest of my life. Like I love acting, and I couldn't imagine anything else, me enjoying anything else as much as that. But then this kind of healing abilities started to show up in my life, and this ability to read people's energy and to really be able to hold space for them. And yeah, the rest is history. Like I set up my business, and it just did so well so quickly that it just for me was the biggest sign of the universe saying like, boom, this is your path, this is what you need to be doing. So I just left all the acting and pursued with this, and never looked back.
Wow, that's quite the story, man. That's crazy. That's awesome. I mean that in a good way, though. That's awesome.
It is
That's
crazy. And I kind of gave you the really like quick version of it all. But I think the biggest thing for me, especially now with all of my knowledge and understanding of our reality, and well, my perception and my understanding of that reality, it doesn't mean it's everyone else's, is that like I really started to notice how I am the universe experiencing itself. And I started to notice how my thoughts create my reality and how instantaneous my manifestations became. Although they were negative manifestations, they were still manifestations nonetheless, right? They were
Right.
created by me, um, through my thoughts and through my feelings and my beliefs. And now, looking back in hindsight, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what was actually going on. I wasn't actually losing my mind. I wasn't evil. I wasn't all these things. I actually was just tapping into my kind of God power, my universal power, but with no anchor. So it just was going all over the place.
Wow, that's crazy. I think ketamine is one drug that I've never actually tried. I had the opportunity to do it once, but I never did.
Okay,
Crazy, man.
don't do
Crazy.
it.
No, yeah, I'm not going to now. Those days are far done. That is
Yeah.
crazy, man. That is awesome. Well, that's amazing that you're able to make that healing journey and come back and turn that negative into a positive, because I'm sure you're helping so many people. It's pretty amazing what you're able to do.
Yeah,
And like,
and I was just going to say, one of the things was when I was going through this journey, and then I was on the retreat, and there was this woman, girl, lady, friend of mine now. She was doing this Chinese like organ pressure, and she was pressing on my organs, and she was pressing on like my stomach, and she had to press really, really deep. And then suddenly, I just had all of this like emotion that came up, and she said, "There's something that has really affected you deeply, but one day you're going to realize that this is going to be your gold, and this is actually going to be the thing that's going to." And I was just like, I knew exactly what she was talking about. I was like, there's no way this is going to be my gold. And lo and behold, she was right. And it was such a comforting thing for me, and maybe anyone that's listening, that's struggling or going through difficult times, that actually maybe that's going to be your gold at some point.
yeah, that's beautiful. That's amazing that your clients aren't able to really bullshit you, because you see right through them and read what's going on. So that's a pretty wild advantage you had got going on there. So that's pretty crazy. Could you kind of just explain like how you're able to read someone's frequency and what that looks like?
Yeah. How can I explain? I can't. I All I do is I just close my eyes, and then I just tune into that person's energy. And then like have a conversation with their energy or with their unconscious. And I receive everything is always, I always receive it as like a knowing, and also like a voice, not in my ear, but like a voice in my head, and I can see it as well. And so I just tune in, and I just see, okay, interesting, like this is what's going on. And then I go up to like a higher consciousness. You can call it your higher self, God, source, whatever you want. And I go into that energy, and then I ask questions about what I've just picked up, right? So I'll be like, okay, so what is the biggest block for this person at the moment, because this is what they're going through. And then I hear like what comes through. So it's hard to say, like I can't give you like a tangible thing, because it's all happening within me.
Mhm.
But it just, the messages are so clear within me. And it's just a feeling. And when I work with my clients one to one, um, it's even more embodied. So like if I'm working with them and we're like deep in like a healing, I then start to feel what they're feeling, right? And so I can start to feel like, oh, okay, they're not fully taking on board what we're talking about right now. There's still something that's stuck there, because I can feel that it's stuck. So it's pretty amazing. It fast
Mhm.
forwards healing massively. Mm.
Yeah, massively. You definitely have an advantage there working with your clients, because you can see what's going on. That's
Mm.
crazy. And I've had the opportunity, the one time you were doing an Instagram live and you were doing some readings, and I tuned in and I watched you do readings for several people, and every single one was like spot on. Have you ever had a moment where it wasn't spot on? Like, have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny because it rarely happens, and when it does happen, I always see it as it's nothing to do with me, and it's to do with how they've chosen to receive it. Because the
Mhm.
moment you start to doubt yourself, the moment you start to think, oh no, like, oh, I shouldn't have, like all this kind of stuff, you start to lose touch with that connection. I trust my connection like more than I trust anything in this reality, right? And I trust that whatever I'm receiving is the truth. And so if someone's like, well, that didn't resonate, like I did a reading for someone, they're like, oh, that didn't resonate. And it was just because they didn't want to hear what what I had to say. And they weren't, the walls are up and they're defensive. But if I'm able to tune into someone, and it's scary, yeah, because I like you, especially when I do those Instagram things or on TikTok, like I it's just like boom, like whatever that I see a name and that's it. And like if I get a message that says, this person really wants to have children, is unable to have children, and that's really impacting their life, and I say it, like that's putting my neck on the line, because they could be like, well, no, I already have kids, or and it's, I always, moral of the story, always trust what comes through, because it's usually the right thing.
Wow, that's incredible. That's awesome. All right, brother. Well, let's get into the topic of limiting beliefs and relationships. I guess to start off, for people that don't know, what is a limiting belief?
Sure. A limiting belief is a belief system that you created usually between the ages of 0 and 7. But of course, that could have happened also during your teenage years, and it also can happen in your adult years. But it's normally in your formative years between 0 and 7, because your brain is still developing and still very malleable. It stops, like you are normally in. Your brain waves is normally in theta brainwave, which is a meditative state or a hypnosis state. Between the ages of 0 and 13. So that's when you're very, very impressionable. And a limiting belief is a misunderstanding of a situation. So you didn't have your prefrontal cortex isn't developed enough to understand. You don't have critical thinking. So something happened, and you then created a belief system out of it. And then that belief system then became anchored in as a truth for you, because then it started to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and your world or your reality started to mirror that back over and over again, which just anchored that belief in more and more. And then that became a limiting belief. So that could be like, I'm unworthy of love, or I'll never be successful, or all men are cheaters, or whatever it may be, right? And then that starts to define your reality. Your whole reality is just based on your belief systems. What you believe to be true, you will see in your reality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was just going to say what you said there. So what you believe about yourself is what comes up in your reality. So if I believe I'm not going to be successful, then I'm never going to be successful. I know for a long time, I believed that I wasn't worth making a certain amount of money. And of course, I didn't go above that, because I didn't believe I was worth that. Yeah, limiting beliefs are crazy. I remember when I worked with my first mentor over a year ago, and we started working on limiting beliefs, and I had a lot, and I still do have a lot that I'm working through, but I had a page of like, over 20 of them. And that's when I first learned about limiting beliefs and rewriting your limiting beliefs. But yeah, that's, super, a huge piece of the puzzle in our lives, I think. And, I guess my next question would be, how do people, if they don't have the opportunity to work with someone like you, how do people identify these limiting beliefs? Like, where do you start on identifying them and starting to work with them? What's your recommendation for that?
Yeah, so our limiting beliefs are usually linked to any form of resistance within our system. So if we are resisting our present moment, it's usually linked to a limiting belief. So anything that maybe makes you feel anxious, worried, guilty, shameful, sad, angry, rage, all of these emotions that are the absence of love, basically, that are not who you truly are at core, they are normally pointing to a limiting belief. So what I would normally say to someone, if you're really interested in working on yourself and doing that sort of healing, you want to start to look at what are your triggers in life, because your triggers are your biggest indicator to show where you're out of alignment with your higher self. So, maybe you have a boss that scolds you, and it's not that big of a deal, but poof, you've taken it like completely to heart, and you really have like so much resentment towards your boss. That's a limiting belief, because it's probably just activated your core wound, which was like, I'm not good enough, or no one ever listens to me, or my opinion doesn't matter. So it's really starting to notice of, where am I being active where am I actively choosing to react to my environment? And then start to ask yourself, well, what is that actually saying about me? Rather than blaming it and putting it on them, start to look at it like, well, what is this trying to show about me? What is it trying to uncover? And so once you have uncovered that belief system, I always say, like, go back to your core wound. Like, think back to the little boy or the little girl within you and focus on that. And because that's where it's coming from. So, for example, with the person who gets scolded at work, it's the little boy who felt like growing up his opinion never mattered, and then suddenly, like, this authority figure, who actually is just a representation of a caregiver but in a different form, is this representation of for him of like, oh, okay, so it means that my opinion doesn't matter, or I don't matter. And so then when you start to understand where that's coming from, that already starts to untangle your limiting belief, because a lot of our limiting beliefs are in the subconscious, the unconscious of our minds. And that's why they're running the show. The more you can bring awareness to them, the more you can understand where they're coming from, the more they start to lose their grip. And then what I would then say is, if you then figured out where it's actually coming from, you want to start to disprove the belief system. This is if you're doing this work on yourself. So you want to be like, okay, so my opinion doesn't matter. Okay, so that's my belief. But like, how factually prove, like, how much fact do you have to say that? And you want to write down all of the facts that prove that belief system is true. And so you're gonna write down these things that actually are not factual at all. They're just you making presumptions, or you focusing on your past in some ways. And then you're gonna look at them all, and then you're gonna prove out why they're all incorrect, why they're not true, why it's just like they're all just your own fallacy, your own creation. And by doing that, you then start to also reconnect those neural pathways to a new way of thinking, which is neuroplasticity. And then you begin to think in a different way. So I always would say, like, if that's what you want to do, just use your environment. Like, you don't even need to go digging. You don't even need to go deep diving. Like, your life is constantly going to mirror back to you exactly what's limiting you at the moment, and how you're limiting yourself. And how you choose to react to a situation is going to tell you exactly what needs to be healed.
Yeah, that's the great thing about doing this work, is there's always so many opportunities to practice. You don't have to go looking for it. You just have to kind of look within and see what's coming up. And so, this is essentially doing inner child work, basically, right? It's going back to your childhood and figuring out what these feelings are. And yeah, it's all kind of connected.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of, because some people can like run away from the idea of inner child work, or be like, well, I don't really get what inner child is. And I think it's like, I always just say to people, all you're doing is you're unlearning all the untruths that you took on board as truths, that you chose to take on board as truths. All you're literally doing is just unlearning all that stuff to remember who you truly are. Before all of this nonsense that you started to believe about. And yes, a lot of it comes back to having to re-educate and heal the inner child. And then another part of it comes to like regulating the nervous system so that you are in alignment to your new belief system, and then embodying that belief system. Because you can, and this is why I find like talking therapy is great for awareness, but it doesn't actually give you the solutions, because it brings you to the understanding of like, okay, yes, my father left me, left the family, and that made me feel like I wasn't loved, and then I developed an abandonment wound. Boom. Okay, great, you have the awareness, but where's the solution? Like, you haven't actually helped heal properly that part of yourself. So that part of yourself is just keep on repeating the same patterns. And also, you haven't embodied a new truth. Consciously, you might believe it to be the truth, but unconsciously, you're not there yet.
Right. And how long does it typically take for someone to, get rid of those old limiting beliefs and create the new beliefs? I don't even know if that's possible to answer. I think it would be different for everyone, but
Yeah, Jason, it's definitely different for everyone, for sure, and it really depends on the depth of that belief system, and how ingrained it is in your psyche. like if I was say like when with my clients that they work with me one-to-one, I mean, it shifts very, very quickly, but that's just because I take them through a whole process that allows it to shift quickly. If you're
Mhm.
doing it on your own, it really depends on, like I said, the level of trauma, or the level of groove that you've created with that belief system, and how much it has actually governed your reality and your life. That will tell you how easy or how hard it is to shift. So, for example, if you have like belief systems around love, and that's your foundation, right? Like that's before everything. Like love is the thing that we first experience, the moment we're born, hopefully. So love is a really, really big one. And so if you have a lot of limiting beliefs, so like not feeling like you're good enough, um, depending on where that's coming from, if it's coming from like because you grew up in an abusive household, or because you had a emotionally manipulative mother, or whatever it may be, that will define how long it's going to actually take for you to shift your limiting beliefs on your own.
Interesting. Yeah, and on the speaking of childhood trauma, a lot of people think that their childhood, they had a great childhood and they had no trauma, but trauma can come in lots of forms. It's not just like, physical abuse and stuff like that. Can you speak to, some examples of childhood trauma that people might not be aware of?
Yeah, I think this is a thing, is we have to like destigmatize the word trauma,
Hmm.
because it's like, if we think of the word trauma, we think of like brain trauma, like something really like, if you think of it in medical terms, like if someone has a trauma in a car accident, like it's terrible. It's like a
Yeah.
really bad thing that's happened, right? And so naturally we have been programmed to believe like, well, trauma is like it's awful. Like as you said, it has to be the worst of the worst, which is not true. Trauma is any moment which made you feel uncomfortable in that moment, but to the point where it starts to make you question your own set of values, your own belief systems, your own self. That for me is what trauma is. So, I have a client who, she was really very shy, and she wanted to take up more space and be seen and be heard more. And one of the biggest things that was her trauma was that she was in class and she began to sing, and then she sang off key, I think, or she sang, and then everyone, like in her mind, everyone started laughing at her, and making her feel really bad. And that was her big trauma. And that was when that she felt like, well, it's not safe for me to be seen, because last time I was seen, I got all of this ridicule, and I felt really embarrassed, and no one really wants to feel embarrassed. So like,
Mhm.
it can be the most minuscule thing. Like it can be so small, it could be like, this is just an example because I work with a lot of gay men. It could be like, the person wanted to play with Barbie dolls, but their parent gave them an action man instead.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's not a big deal. There was no pain, there was no one was hit, but that made a huge impact on the child, because their choice was taken away, and they were made to feel what they wanted was wrong, and they were made to feel that there was something bad in what they desired. So yeah, trauma comes in all different shapes and sizes, and I wish we could create a new word to define it, because it's not trauma. It's just moments where we disconnected from ourselves.
Mhm.
um yeah.
Yeah, it is. So I've definitely experienced that. Like I play music and stuff, and I've been really shy my whole life because I've experienced a few things. I've had some trauma, where people have said things to me where I didn't feel safe, and made me not want to share my music, I guess. But you know, when those feelings come up, that fear and stuff, is it safe to say that that is just an old version of you trying to keep you safe by not doing that thing again? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Depending, so for example, with that woman, that's definitely, that part of her that's trying to keep her safe, and being like, look, this was terrible, it really made you feel uncomfortable. It also activates your amygdala, which is your emotional center, and makes you replay all of the emotions again, which feels really uncomfortable and you don't want to go there. So it like protects you from having to experience that again. So yeah, 100%. It usually is always coming from a place of like wanting to keep you safe, or wanting to keep you as small as possible, because then you're safe, then nothing's going to harm you. And then it comes from our reptilian side of our brain, which is, the animal side of us, that's just like survival of the fittest, right? And what better way to survive than to be not seen, especially back in the times when we were chasing saber-toothed tigers. Like, we would not want to be seen. You wouldn't want to be taking up too much room and space, because it was dangerous.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, I definitely have a lot of things I'm working through right now with like childhood stuff and limiting beliefs. I just started seeing a therapist a couple of weeks ago, and it's funny because I'm just going to go off on a rant here. I went and saw this therapist, and I'm like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I just need someone to like talk to about stuff, because I have no one to talk to, and I'm driving my wife crazy with it, with all this stuff. So I need someone else to talk to other than my wife. And then I went and I started talking about all this stuff, and she's like, that's your inner child, and that's your inner child. And then I went from thinking like, oh, I've already done my inner child work, to I got tons of work to do still. So I think it's a lifelong process doing this healing stuff. But the one thing I've been doing personally is, like, when those things come up, I've been trying to recognize which version of me is scared and why they're scared, and then just kind of giving that version of me love, and saying that it's going to be okay. So I've been doing that for a couple of weeks, and it's been pretty cool. My therapist described it as like, it's like driving a bus. So I'm driving the bus, and then something happens, and then another version of me comes up and starts driving the bus and takes the wheel, and I'm not in control anymore. And that was a good visual for me to kind of understand. But yeah, so I've been deeply practicing in that, so that really resonates with me a lot. But yeah, I guess my next question is on the topic of relationships. So I just want to talk a little bit about how people's limiting beliefs are affecting their relationship, whether they're looking for a relationship or whether they're already in a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so impactful. So let's first talk about individuals who are looking for a relationship. If we have to start to look at everything as patterns, and those patterns are trying to tell us something. And so if we keep repeating the same pattern, it's because there's something within us that's creating that, right? And so it's easy for us as human beings to say, well, I don't have any, oh, I have no control. Like, it's the universe, or all the, good men or women are taken, or it's like this, like, blame. I'm not going to take any responsibility. But in actuality, if you start to really take on board the understanding that your beliefs are create your reality, then you are in charge of your whole reality. No one else. You are in the driver's seat, not anyone else. And so you have to start to notice and look like, okay, well, what is the pattern that's going on in my relationship here? Do I go, like, when I start to get into a relationship, do I feel really anxious that this person's going to leave me? Boom, you've got some abandonment wounds taking place, right? And when you get into a relationship, do you feel like whatever you do is never enough? Okay, you've got some self-worth issues that are coming up. When you ever get into a relationship, do you end up like giving your all, like you're almost like, just all encompassing? That means that you're a people pleaser, and the people pleasing tendencies, that's also coming from a part of you that will experience conditional love and doesn't understand that you can receive unconditional love, right? So someone who's trying to get into a relationship, and if they keep repeating the same pattern over and over again, it's because there is a subconscious belief, there are subconscious programmings that are creating that scenario in the first place. And so if you don't do anything about it, you're just going to keep attracting the same partner. Now, you can attract that partner, but what's going to happen is it's going to be a huge learning curve for both of you, because you're attracting them at your conscious level, right? Your level of consciousness, and their level of consciousness. And so then you're going to be growing, maybe, but it's also not going to be a smooth ride, right? And especially if you've got like poor self-worth and stuff, you're going to attract someone who's going to amplify that lack of self-worth by not seeing you, not valuing you, not being there for you, and all that kind of stuff. So that's what happens. If you're in a relationship, the limiting beliefs also come up massively on how you deal with the relationship in the first place. Like, how do you deal with conflict? Are you the type of person that retreats, or are you the type of person that feels like you need to deal with it in immediately? Do you feel like you need to shout at the person? Is that because you grew up in an environment that had a lot of conflict and you felt like that was the safest way to deal with your feelings? Are you the type of person that knows how to communicate effectively with your partner? Or are you like, there's all these different kind of things, and they're all linked to how you were brought up and the belief systems that you have around yourself and around relationships. One of the things I see the most often is always a breakdown in communication. And if you can't communicate effectively, you're going to really struggle to have a really healthy relationship, because communication is key. And that's one of the main reasons people get divorced. And so when, you're faced with a difficult experience, because relationships aren't easy all the time, right? It is a roller coaster ride. And if you don't know how to handle that, if you have a tendency, because, you grew up in an environment that the safest way was just to avoid conflict, so then you just end up being like a pacifist, and you're not able to actually handle it or face the truth of what's going on in the relationship. What's going to happen is you're both just going to keep going as you are, and at some point that relationship is just going to break down. At some point you're going to get to a place where one of you is going to make a decision, and that either that decision is that person is unfaithful, because there's no communication taking place, so that person goes behind that person's back, is unfaithful, and then there's a breakdown, or that person's just like had enough and chooses to leave, or whatever it is. So it's so important. Like, I can't like emphasize it enough. People talk about limiting beliefs all the time, and I feel like sometimes people don't really have a grasp or understanding what that actually entails, and how much that actually impacts your life. And if you are having any challenges or difficulties in relationships, then stop looking outside of yourself and start to look inside yourself, because you are creating that. It takes two to tango.
Yeah, I love that you said that. Stop looking outside of yourself and start looking inside of yourself. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't know or don't realize is you need to look within, because we're always so quick to blame, this, oh, it's your fault, oh, it's your fault. But when you actually look within, and that's why I'm such a big advocate for meditation, because that's helped me so much to like look within. And I just wanted to share something when you talked about like partners with arguments. So me and my wife have been together now for, I don't know, I'm probably, sorry, Ashley, I'm saying this wrong, probably 15 years. We've been married for like 11 years, I think. But we're both like so easygoing, and we're both like kind of the people pleaser type. And, we never had arguments ever, because, and I used to say, oh, me and Ashley never argue. But the reason was because we both were just holding everything in, and we weren't saying what we wanted to say. And then it's funny, a year ago or so, I signed up for this 12-week group coaching program, Living with Soul, with one of my mentors, Shriyanka, and Ashley got the opportunity to do it as well. So we both went through this 12-week program. And, when we started speaking our truth and opening our throat chakras and all this stuff, and it's great. Now we argue all the time, but not in a bad way, but in a good way. We communicate now. We argue. If something's bothering us, we'll say it. And I think that's a really important thing in a relationship. And yes, sometimes it's, we're both avoiding the confrontation, but we're just holding everything in the whole time. So I think it's really great that we've done the inner work and we're able to communicate. And I really love what you said at the beginning there, was that our thoughts create our reality. And I think a lot of people don't realize that or know that. But I think that's a really important point. Do you could you touch on that a little bit more about how our thoughts create our reality, and give like some examples?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you can use the analogy of there's a person who is standing outside of a room and doesn't know what that room looks like inside. Now, the first person has and it's the same person. Okay, the first person, when he arrives, he has had like a really, really shitty day, like really difficult. Boss has shouted at him, was driving, like was in traffic, all this kind of stuff. And he opens the room, looks into the room, and all he can see is just like, well, it's not very nice. Like, it's not, I don't really like it. And then the same person has an amazing day, feeling really positive, feeling really happy, and opens the door, looks in the room, and it's like, oh wow, like this is so amazing. Look at the cornicing, like look at that like golden thing. You start to notice all these little things. The only thing that changed was their own meaning, like their perception of that experience based on what was going on within themselves. So that's like, how our emotions are affecting our reality all the time, and our perception, basically, because everything is meaningless until we give it meaning. Absolutely everything is meaningless. Now, when we say our thoughts create our reality, it's really understanding that, like, if you think a thought enough, that's what's going to materialize. So, and people are like, well, yeah, I've been thinking like I'm going to win the lottery, and I haven't won the lottery. But it's like, that's not that. That's the thing is, it's about the resistance that you have to the thought at the same time. So you can think like, I'm going to win the lottery, I'm going to win the lottery. But if you don't believe that you're going to win the lottery, and if you don't have belief systems that like support that, it's never going to happen. However, we're very good at manifesting negative things in our reality because we have no attachment to it. It's almost like it's like a deep knowing that that's what's going to happen, right? Oh, I'm going to miss my train. I bet I'm going to miss my train. I'm sure I'm going to miss my train. And what happens? You miss your train, right? You created that. I'm sure you could have, if you were in a more positive mindset and said like, I know I'm going to catch that train. It's going to be amazing. I'm sure I'm going to catch that train. You're going to catch that train because your reality is just going to reflect back your set of belief systems. And if you didn't catch that train, that's okay, because you're in a mindset which will mean that, like, something else is going to come along and be an amazing experience. So it's really, really important that we start to check in and see like, well, what are my thoughts? And one of my favorite, if I can share, one of my favorite exercises to do that, which I share with my clients, is and it takes a lot of like energy, but it's a really good way to start to see like where your thoughts at is. For a week, every 15 minutes, you put an alarm on your phone, and every 15 minutes, you're just going to write down on your phone what you're thinking and how it's making you feel. And then you're going to have like a list of data for 7 days, and you're going to start to be able to see it, like what the patterns are, like what is the main thought pattern that you keep having over and over and over again, and then when you start to see that, you can start to realize, okay, so I keep thinking about this and I keep not seeing that in my reality. That's probably because, I keep thinking about this. So say like business, for example, okay? You keep thinking, it's never going to work. It's never going to work. It's never going to work. And you start to look and you realize, oh my God, I have a lot of times I'm saying it's never going to work, and your business isn't working. Lo and behold, you've created that. So then it gives you that like impulse and data, like to really be like, okay, cool. Well, what if I just shift that? What if every single time I have a thought that says it's never going to work, I say cancel, clear, release? Like, that's my mantra. I just release that thought, and I say, of course it's going to work. I know it's going to work. What if I start to like be really meticulous with that, and then just allow that to be my new thought pattern, and do that and see how that anchors in, and then see how that changes, and then in a month's time do that exercise again and see how your thoughts have changed. It's a really great way to change
I love
yourself.
that. That's beautiful, Andrew. Is there an easy way to set a timer every 15 minutes on your phone, or do you have to go in and like
Uh,
create an alarm? Because that would be a lot of
yeah,
alarms you'd have to set.
it's a lot of alarms, but what is the payoff?
True. No, so I guess you would just have to do it for one day and just have it repeating. That's
Yeah.
great. I'm going to try that. And yeah, well, it's like, so our thoughts aren't really creating our reality in a way that it's going to manifest a new reality. Our thoughts are creating our reality in a way as our perception of the reality. Or is
Yes,
it a
and
little bit of both? It's a little bit of
it's
both, I
both.
think.
Our thoughts definitely create our reality, 100%. And our thoughts, what creates our reality are our belief systems. what creates our thoughts are our belief system. So like, if you have a belief system, I'm not good enough, then you'll have thoughts that are going to mirror that belief system, I'm not good enough. That's why we always go back to belief systems and why we need to shift our belief systems, right? So it's your beliefs that create your reality, but your beliefs and your thoughts are also interconnected as well. You also have to look at it from perspective of energy as well. Your frequency has an impact on your reality. So, if you are feeling high vibe and joyful and stuff, usually your day is pretty good. If you're feeling low and heavy, all this kind of stuff, usually your day is pretty shit. And so you want to start to look at like, okay, it's a combination of like my beliefs, my thoughts, and my feelings, my frequency. Now, other people will say, well, yeah, but then why is it that like, there are loads of wealthy people out there who are assholes, right? Who make loads and loads of money, but they're not high vibe, they're not high frequency. That's because they have a set of belief systems that align with making a lot of money. But what happens is that their belief systems doesn't mean that they're going to also be happy people, right? So you want to do this work and be a happy person. You don't want to just have like loads of success in your business, but like not be working on your frequency and just feeling miserable all the time. So I always say like it's a combination of all three. And yes, your reality will mirror that back to you. And if you start to just look back at certain situations and things in your life, and look at it like what was going on, what was I thinking, how was I feeling, and all this kind of stuff, you're going to start to see, this manifestation isn't some buzzword, it's not some like woo-woo nonsense. It's literally the foundations of reality. Everything started off in your imagination. Right now, this webcam that I'm using was in someone's mind, and then it became the material. That is literally what manifestation is. You have a thought and it becomes the material. It just takes a bit of time to come into our 3D reality because the vibration in our 3D reality is much lower comparison to your imagination, your thought, which is at much higher vibration.
Yeah. 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 Manifestation, it's not instantaneous manifestation. You have to be patient and wait for it. And you have to hold that belief while it's manifest. Because sometimes I think I'm doing a good job of believing and manifesting, but then you just have to keep it going. The one question I had for you, I guess the thing I struggle with is believing without evidence. And, how can someone believe they're going to be successful if they've never been successful before? Like how do you embody that if you have no evidence? That's the thing where I struggle with sometimes.
That's a really good question. So Wayne Dyer always says, believing is seeing, right? Like in order to see it, you have to believe it. And so, if you've never been successful before, maybe you've never been successful in that realm, but you've experienced success, some form of success. Like for you, for example, like, you're a father and you're a very good father, and that's a success in itself, right? And so you have access to the frequency of what success feels like. And so for someone who, is like, well, I've never experienced this, but you just haven't had it in that way, but it's still the same thing. Right. You're still feeling a sense of elation, pride, joy, all the things that success may give you. So a really good tool is to anchor in that frequency of success every day, of just being like, and utilizing your past, your experiences as inspiration to feel that success. Sometimes we can get a bit lost with manifestation, and we can go into a bit like, really lot into the future and think about the future stuff and stuff, and it can create a bit of attachment. And so what is a good way of doing it is to start to use, like, you can use your future as inspiration for the feeling, or you can use, different experiences in your past as inspiration for the feeling. But the most important is the present now moment. So feeling that in the now moment and carrying that feeling with you, even, throughout your day, even if it feels difficult, just keep coming back and keep carrying it, because it will end up showing up in your life. Because essentially what you're doing is you're anchoring yourself so deeply in that frequency and that embodiment that your belief system just says, well, yeah, it's like it's gonna happen. Like I maybe don't see it just yet, but I know it's gonna happen. And then I always, trust that the universe is always working out in my favor. Like it wants what I want, but I need to get out of my own way, and the only way I can do that is to not worry and to not have fear, because those are the two things that will cut off the flow of the universe.
Oh, yeah. Fear's a big one for me.
Yeah, I think it's a big one for everyone, eh? Like
It is.
fear is it's the absence of love, so it's normal. We all experience it.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I lost my train of thought, what I was going to say there, but I wanted to touch on frequency. Could you speak a little bit more about our frequency for those people who don't really know what that is or understand what that is?
Yeah. So your frequency is just your vibrational set point. So there are some people that that are just so magnetic. Like they just walk in the room and they just attract the attention. Like people are just massively drawn to them. And they just have this frequency that's like undeniable and unconscious, and everyone can experience it. And that's just like this feeling, this frequency within themselves that then is emitted, and then and then attracts it. So if you are in like a lot of doubt, worry, fear, anxiety, shame's the worst one. Like that's the lowest vibrational frequency you can be in. Guilt, anger is actually not too bad because you're moving into action. So anger, vibrational frequency. Usually you then move into another vibrational frequency if you can move out of anger. Like rage is not the best because you get stuck in it. Resentment, all those things. Those are low. I hate to use the word low because it creates like contrast in the sense of like something's good or bad. But if we were to use it just in the sense of like some things are hot and some things are cold, we could say that they're cold frequencies, right? They're frequencies that vibrate at a lower state, which means that you are just going to attract the same type of vibrational frequency. So, if you're feeling pretty shameful, you're going to attract experiences to feel more shame. You might attract people who are like energy vampires, these type of people who just like unload on you all the time, or whatever it may be. And as you move up the echelons, when you move into like a higher vibrational frequency, and it's not about being like happy all the time, but it's about having that base set frequency of joy within you, of just this like wonderment, of excitement for life. You don't have to be happy all the time, but like you're anchored in this knowing that like, yes, like life is good, life is, whatever it may be. And when you just have that wonder and that vibrational set point, you start to have really amazing experiences that come in because you're just so open and you're vibrating closer to the truth of who you are, which is source, God, universe, which is all of those frequencies, right? So we could say the cold frequencies are the ego, which is the absence of love or the disconnect of love. And the warm frequencies are the soul or the higher self or whatever, which is the reconnection to love.
Right. Beautiful. So like our frequency, our level of consciousness basically is what's determining our frequency, basically.
Yeah. Yes, I would say so. Yes, I think
Have you
it's
ever seen
difficult.
have you ever seen the level of consciousness scale? I forget
By
the
David
gentleman that put it
Hawkins.
all. Yeah, David Hawkins. Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the thing is, there are people who have like high levels of consciousness, but who are still stuck. It's funny because, there are some very spiritual people out there, but who are
interesting.
still very stuck in like spiritual ego, or, who
Mhm.
may take advantage of other people, and all that kind of stuff. But they've reached states of consciousness. Do you know what I mean? Like they have gotten to states of consciousness, but at the same time, they're also still stuck in their ego. So yeah, I guess you
Okay,
could say
interesting.
you could say it's like levels of consciousness, but it also depends on, yeah, it really depends on like where that person's at, because all I'm thinking is that guy who does Bikram yoga, right? Who ended up being like this awful person who did like all of these awful things. And, he he's a yogi and he's like really does loads of meditation and all this kind of stuff, and from on the outside was seen as like a very like a guru and is like enlightened, but actually what he does behind the scenes, it's not at all that. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, cool. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, interesting. And I remember what I was going to say before when you were talking was the visualization. So going back, so for me, let's say hypothetically, for me, if I'm having if I'm having difficulty visualizing or believing in my future success, I could go back to a past, say when I was running a kitchen and you know, crushing it in the kitchen, go back to a really successful night, embody that feeling of that success and how I felt and everything, and then take that feeling and carry it forward to manifesting my future desires or my future wants, basically.
Yes, because
Okay.
all you need to do is just hold on to that frequency of that success, and then it will and keep on coming back to that, and also just keep coming back to like this, like the knowledge that things are gonna be okay, like everything's gonna work out, like you have this deep trust that it's gonna work out.
Mhm.
But also, yeah, utilizing, if you've crushed it in the kitchen and stuff, and you felt really successful, just feeling that feeling, and just allowing that to be your North Star, and allow that to just move you through life.
I love that. And then when you get those limiting beliefs coming in, and what was the mantra that you said to get rid of
I
those
say
limiting
cancel, clear, release.
cancel, clear, release. So when you get those doubts coming in, you cancel, clear, release them, and then you just reaffirm your positive belief or expanded belief, or however you want to call it.
You want to first maybe, depending on how much you allowed yourself to go into the story of that belief system, you're going to want to regulate your nervous system, because your nervous system would have dysregulated. And so you would have started to move into your fight or flight, which is very hard for you to then be able to then start to feel that energy of success.
I
So
got
what
you.
I would say is instead of going straight into that, you want to just do some nervous system regulation, like you breathe in for 6 and breathe out for 8, and do that for 2 minutes, and then have your system regulated, and then go back into that good feeling of success and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, I got you. Cool. Yeah, that's super helpful for me. Yeah, regulate your nervous system, get rid of that fight or flight, that baseline anxiety or whatever feeling that you have. Once that's gone, then move back into it. Okay, cool. That is super helpful, man. That is
Good.
awesome. That is awesome. All right, we got time for maybe one or two more questions here. I guess where else we want to go from here, Andrew? Let's
I
talk
don't
about.
really.
Did we talk about attraction energy already? We kind of talked about that a little. I think we just talked about
Yeah,
that.
it's linked to your frequency. Yeah, I
What
think.
about you said the other day? I heard you say that triggers are your GPS.
Yeah. So your triggers are anything that like makes you feel uncomfortable in the moment. Uh, so, for example, I did kind of touch upon it, but I can touch upon it again. So, for example, like someone doesn't bring you a gift when they come over for dinner. Okay, like they don't bring a bottle of wine, and you get like really triggered by that. You're like, and you go into like, that's outrageous. Like, I can't believe they didn't do that. Like, don't they realize I'm making dinner for them and all this kind of stuff. You want to then look at like, okay, but dude, it's a bottle of wine. Chill. Like, why are you getting so triggered by this? It's like, well, actually, what does that tell me? Like, what do I think that means if someone doesn't bring a bottle of wine? Well, it means that person doesn't respect me. Oh, okay. So actually, it's got nothing to do with bottle of wine. It feels it's to do with you not feeling respected. And so then you use your trigger to start to realize, like, okay, so actually I feel disrespected, but I don't actually. It's nothing to do with this. It's like, when did I first feel disrespected, or why do I feel disrespected if someone doesn't show me attention or affection or whatever it may be. So you start to use those little moments, those really micro triggers that you wouldn't like even bat an eyelid about. You just think, well, that's just how things are. No, it's not. Why is it that someone else doesn't react that way at all? It's not your personality. It's your choices of how you're choosing to react to your reality, right? So when you can start to just see all those micro triggers and really just become really attentive to them and understand why they're there in the first place, you find a lot more peace and freedom.
Mm-hmm. No, I think I've been good at being aware of those triggers, but sometimes I struggle with finding the underlining root cause of some things. But you just have to
excavation. I always, you can do the 5 whys, which is just basically saying like, why am I so upset by this? Well, because he should have brought a bottle of wine. Why should he have brought a bottle of wine? Well, because he's my best friend. Why should your best friend bring a bottle of wine? Well, because it means that they love me. Why does it mean that someone bringing a bottle of wine means that they love me? Well, because when I grew up, gifting was a form of love. Boom. You realize that now you have a limiting belief if you understand that gifting is a form of love.
Boom. I love that, man. That's awesome. Oh, that's super helpful. That's awesome, man. All right, Andrew, that was great, man. We're coming to the end of our time here. So before we wrap things up, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners? Is there anything we didn't cover today that you'd like to add?
No, there's nothing we didn't cover. I just, if anyone that's listening, just really know that you have so much more power than you realize. And it just starts with taking radical responsibility, and choosing to make a change.
I love that. And do you want to speak a little bit about your new your program that you're launching?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I have a 4-month one-to-one container called the Frequency Shift Program, that is launching at the end of March. It is a one-to-one bespoke VIP program for individuals who want to heal their past in order to step into their authentic selves and open the doors to true love. So it's for people who, want to attract a relationship, or who maybe are struggling in their own relationship, and want to heal in that way.
That's beautiful, man. I'm launching my program at the end of March too. It's like we're on the same timeline, brother.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Awesome, man. And last thing is, where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
You can find me on Instagram, which is at Andrew Rowe, ROWE 111. It's the same handle for TikTok as well. Or you can find me on my website, which is www.andrew-rowe.co.uk.
Beautiful. And for everyone listening, I'll include Andrew's information in the show notes below. So make sure you go check him out. That was great, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining us today, man. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Awesome.
Bye.
And yes, like I said, for everyone listening, I'll include Andrew's information in the show notes below. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can reach out to me on Instagram at transformative_pathways. And you can find my link tree in the show notes below, where you'll have access to all my social media, my email list, my private community, and options to apply for my one-on-one coaching program. Also, if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love it if you could like, subscribe, and follow us on your favorite listening platform. If you'd like to support the show, it would be so grateful if you could take a moment to leave us a review. It would mean so much to us and also help the show reach more listeners. And again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to connecting with you all again soon.
This has been the Transformative Pathways Podcast with your host, Jason Dobie. Tune in each week for more insights, inspiring stories, and transformative journeys. Until then, keep exploring the path to keep your best self. Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios.